come into the mental health community, it's really hard to find people that have had the courage to speak up and share positive stories about how they can lead their lives. And you were the first person that did that for me. I think that you had shared at a moment when you were going through your depression that anytime that you would drive by a graveyard, you would want to stop and just go lay down.
Yep.
And that was such a shock for me because I was doing the same thing. I was driving through graveyards. I was praying for death on a daily basis for months. And to see and hear you speak about, that's just a chemical imbalance, stick with medication, continue to do therapy, was really the first time that I had felt hope. And seeing someone that had gotten through the depression and was able to have a successful, healthy, happy life. That was the first time that I felt hope. Because when you go through really bad depression, you don't feel like you have a future. When you have lost everything that you thought was important in your life.
Right.
And you think that there is no way you are going to be able to recover. When you get to talk to someone who has already been through it, you believe them more than even doctors, because it's theoretical for them.
Right.
They haven't necessarily been through it. So when you find someone that is, able to share, here's what's worked well for me, and here's what has not worked well for me, it allows you to pursue additional avenues and have courage to try new things.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to Fresh Hope for Mental Health. I'm Brad Hoefs, your host. Our purpose here at Fresh Hope for Mental Health is to empower you to live a faith-filled, rich, and full life in spite of having a mental health diagnosis. I'm excited because today you're going to meet two friends of mine that we've got here in the studio, and they're new friends to me, but they kind of feel like I've known them for a long time. So I'd like to introduce to you Lee Kyle and his mom, Penny. They're from the great state of Colorado, and they happen to be here in Omaha for our Night of Inspiring Hope. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Lee and I got to know each other through our online group that we have for Fresh Hope. If you didn't know that, we do have, at least at this time of the recording, we have one group online. We're hoping to have more. But I got to know Lee, and he was this guy that was from Colorado. Interestingly enough, on the online group, you can really get to know each other. After some period of time, Lee and I started talking to each other and started to hear Lee's story, and it was very compelling and moving. And Lee, if you don't mind just sharing a little bit about your story with our listeners.
I was diagnosed as bipolar about 2 years ago after going through a manic episode where I just spent an amazing amount of money in a month. Really impacted my career, lost my job, and went into a really, really bad depression, and was just searching anywhere I could to try and find resources that would help me recover. And went to a local church and seeked counseling, and really had struggles there of finding someone that understood what a bipolar diagnosis was. Struggled in finding support groups that were positive. I went to several support groups, week after week, and just I did not feel like I was in the right place. It seemed like people were just helping each other be worse. And they weren't helping to really encourage and cheer people on to find recovery and to live, a good life. And we were so fortunate to find Fresh Hope online, and then found that you were going to launch, an online group. And the online group has just been so important to me. It was a safe place where I felt like, I could share my story, and that I could see people who were living well despite a diagnosis.
Yeah, it matters when you can see somebody who's a little farther down the road maybe than you are, to know that it's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you're in the depths of depression with suicidal ideations, it can be really hard to find hope. And when you find people that have been through similar situations and are on the other side of it and are willing to share their stories about how they have, recovered and maintain, living a good, healthy lifestyle despite their diagnosis.
Right.
It was critical to my recovery.
I think it's very important for people to really have support in a support group, but it's got to be a healthy group, or the kind of group that is going to lift you up and not just be a place where everybody's kind of throwing up on each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Tell me, had you ever experienced any manic phases prior to this one?
I think I had experienced one manic phase before, and I spent like $10,000. And then once I realized I had done it, I went into a horrible depression, think I would, never
be able to recover.
Yeah, be able to recover and get out of that. And then I was diagnosed with depression at that time. But there was no one ever asked if I had, spent a lot of money. And I had no idea that was one of the things that can be associated with bipolar.
That's interesting. So you went in for the treatment for the depression, and the doctor didn't really ask any questions as to what possibly happened before that.
Yeah, right. Yep. So went on an antidepressant, and it seemed to work well for, a few years. And then had a lot of stress going through a divorce, and that's what triggered my mania the second time.
Well, and I think that's very good that you understand what triggered it, because a lot of people underestimate stress, and stress has a lot to do with our brain chemistry.
Yeah.
And when we're under undue stress, and either we maybe don't have the skills to cope with it, or we've placed ourselves under too much stress, it can easily send that signal to the brain that just goes wackadoo.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had always been a person that, anytime I had encountered, stressful situations in my life, it was very quick to just kind of put that situation behind me and continue to move forward. And I never allowed myself to honor the pain of losing
to grieve.
To grieve of losing a loved one or going through a divorce or a job loss. It was always let's move on to the next thing and just kind of shove it in the back.
Well, and it's probably
forward.
That very thing that enabled you or empowered you to be successful in your career, because you've been in sales and big events and held significant positions where that kind of personality that could just push through and keep going and cheerlead everybody else on probably was what made you great.
Yeah, and it was a big insight for me that it is very easy to, when you focus on everyone else, you don't have to focus on yourself.
Yeah.
And you can not maintain that forever. You have to find time in today's society to still take time for yourself, and to allow the appropriate amount of time for mourning, and to go through the grief process and really understand it, and don't allow yourself to wallow in it, but allow it to pass through you, and honor those emotions. They're there for a reason. They're important if you're going to be able to maintain a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, and I think it's imperative to understand that even good changes can bring about grief.
Absolutely.
How many times have I've heard as a pastor where families bring home that second child or that first child, and they're so excited, but there is a moment and a time where used to a whole nother schedule, get used to this, get used to that. The other thing that I don't want to let slip by me here is the fact that I think for those of you who are listening today, understand that it is possible for you to go in for one thing and the doctor doesn't ask the right questions. And you might have gone in for depression, but you had these other periods. Sometimes doctors don't get a full scope of everything. And it depends. You maybe didn't even go to a psychiatrist for the depression. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I was involved in a car accident when I was 15, which caused some damage to my prefrontal lobe, and then also diagnosed with ADD when I was 12. And I've always felt like there was something slightly off. And have done a ton over the last 20 years to try and help understand what's the best ways to take care of my brain, and, manage any symptoms of ADHD. I think I really focused on medication for a long time. And after going through a bipolar manic episode, you realize that it's not just medication. That's an important piece of it, but it's all other aspects of your lifestyle as well. I have learned that exercise, just simply walking several times a week is really important. It's one of the easiest things to treat depression with. And then also, your eating and maintaining a healthy diet is really important as well.
Yeah, it all matters.
Yeah,
it all matters. Part of what has been a joy for me is meeting your mom and getting to know her. Penny, it's a joy to meet you.
Thank you, and blessed to meet you, sir.
Well, I told these two that while they were in Omaha, I wanted to be able to do a podcast, and so we're here. Now, I should tell our listeners that we're recording this in 2017. I don't know when you'll be listening to it, but these two are two of our Inspiring Hope Award winners this year, and I think it's just amazing to me that both you and your ex-husband, who lives down in Texas, you live in Colorado, both nominated your son for the Overcoming Stigma Award, which is quite appropriate, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. No one deserves it more.
And when I saw those nominations come in, I thought, oh, yeah, that's great. Those are perfect. And then the next thing I read is that your husband, your former husband, your ex-husband, nominated you for the Encouraging Hope Award because of you encouraging your son. What an amazing thing.
I was surprised and touched, and
yeah,
couldn't believe it either.
What a wonderful thing. Tell me about how you encouraged him. Tell me about the journey to find someplace for, and what it's like seeing your child struggle, your adult child struggle with such severe depression.
When this first happened, and I was with him a great deal of the time through the mania, I didn't know what it was. I had no idea what it was. I mean, I thought maybe he was just really happy, but it led to so many strange behaviors that I knew nothing of. And when he finally went into the deepest, darkest place, his dad came. And then Lee told his dad everything that had happened. So then his dad stayed for about 3 months, and I was over at his house every day. It's too bad that your hurting child has to suffer through your learning what not to do. I mean, we just did things that we felt were right, but at the time they were not right. And through searching and these meetings and that meetings, which were all very depressing, because there was no one who admittedly had bipolar, who was just a few steps ahead of Lee, that could help him. And then after much searching, much prayer, I watched you at Saddleback Church.
Yeah, and that must have been on a video, right? It wasn't live, was it?
No.
Yeah.
And every day I searched and I called churches. Do you have a mental health group? No. Which is so sad, because that's where it needs to be. It needs to be made aware of in churches, corporations, schools, just everywhere. It's time not to be silent about mental health.
Absolutely. Well, how did you find the video?
Okay.
Did you just
every
Google?
day,
Or?
I was just at the Lord's feet. I was just begging. And I learned a lot about prayer then, too. And I would just be hanging on to him, just hanging on so tight. And he said, could you turn loose and let me do what I need to do? And I was looking through the internet again, Colorado Springs, mental health groups, any, and there it was. There you were. I clicked on it, Saddleback Church. You were talking, giving your testimony. You were telling what it was about, and I immediately went over. I mean, I had no hope at that time. I just didn't know what else to do because everything else just wasn't right. Time-wise, it just wasn't right. So I went over to Lee's and I made him listen. I said, "You got to see this." And the minute he saw you and when you finished speaking, he said, "Mom, that's what I want." And I knew at that moment, at some point, Lee was going to have a ministry in this. He's brutally honest. He's beautifully honest. And one thing he told Gary and I, he said, "Mom, not one thing you and Dad say or do is inspiring or encouraging. You got to let someone else do it. You can't push from behind, nor can you pull from the front. You got to walk alongside." So.
Very interesting, very interesting. So then it was a matter of time before we started our online groups, and
I was on the phone. I was doing emails with one of your fellows.
Last night I ran across a text or a private message from Facebook from you that I don't know if I'd ever seen it or if I had forgotten about it, but you had written me, and I had never answered. And I felt so bad, but I'm so glad that in spite of me not answering, we got connected.
Yeah, I kept calling because it had a time date on when the online groups were. And I had pushed Lee into a church that I'm really ashamed that I did that. It was a church for the so-called unchurched, and they were supposed to be caring and kind. They never called him back. They never followed up with him, even after numerous phone calls. So I was on email with a person who was employed by you saying, is the online group on? No, we're still having some problems. And then I'd do it again, I'd ask again because I thought that is the only thing where he doesn't have to go somewhere out there. It's safe.
Yep. And if you're listening to this today, and even if you have a Fresh Hope group in your community, but you have anxiety or you've got severe depression, all it takes is being able to turn on your webcam, and even if you can't do that, you can do it on the phone. And we have people that attend the online group because of anxiety. And it's a way to really connect with other people, and it is safe. Yeah. Because at any point you can take yourself, you hang up the phone or turn it off if the anxiety's too much. Yeah. But well, let's go back to that us meeting there online, and tell me about what your experience was at first. What struck a chord with you? What was it that became that moment where you decided to flick on your own hope switch?
It was getting to talk with people in a very, very safe environment. Like you said, it's very easy to just click leave meeting if you don't feel like you want to participate. But it's a very safe environment with loving and caring people. And, we've got people from all around the world, including Australia and Canada and the U.S. that are currently participating. And I'm someone from, a corporate background that spent the last 20 years in sales and marketing leadership and always looking for best practices. And when you come into the mental health community, it's really hard to find people that have had the courage to speak up and share positive stories about how they can lead their lives. And you were the first person that did that for me. I think that you had shared at a moment when you were going through your depression that, you were driving, anytime that you would drive by a graveyard, you would want to stop and just go lay down. Yep. And that was such a shock for me because I was doing the same thing. I was driving through graveyards. I was praying for death on a daily basis for months. And to see and hear you speak about, wow, that's just a chemical imbalance. stick with medication, continue to do therapy, was really the first time that I had felt hope. In seeing someone that had gotten through the depression and was able to have a successful, healthy, happy life. That was the first time that I felt hope. Because when you go through really bad depression, you don't feel like you have a future. When you have lost everything that you thought was important in your life,
Right.
And you think that there is no way you are going to be able to recover. When you get to talk to someone who has already been through it, you believe them more than even doctors.
Right, because
it's theoretical for them.
Right.
They haven't necessarily been through it. So when you find someone that is, able to share, here's what's worked well for me, and here's what has not worked well for me, it allows you to pursue additional avenues and have courage to try new things. When you're going through depression, everyone is throwing recommendations at you. Drink more water, go on walks, be out in the sunshine, try arts and crafts.
Well, and all
and
those
it's overwhelming.
things can help, but not if you feel like there's no future. And all the research on hope shows that people become hopeless not only because they feel depressed, but depression takes your future from you. And
Absolutely.
If you believe your brain and you believe the chemical imbalance at that point, what happens is you just feel like there's no hope because there's no future. It's just black. And the truth is, there is hope. The truth is that there is a future. You will get through it. You may not get through it as fast as you want, nor as easily as you want. But it takes courage to keep pushing through. It takes the courage to keep going.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Penny, do you have something you want to add?
I had just, in searching and until the Lord decided to drop you into our lives, I would see things that were catchy. Oh, this could be good for Lee in 21 days.
Sure.
Thank God you came along. I'd still be scratching.
The wonderful thing is that you're blessed with a mom and a dad who weren't giving up. They were going to, at least in your pursuit of anything that would work, you ran across something that did. And I want to encourage you to remember that because, yeah, it may have been the 21-day thing or take a walk, drink some water, do this, do that. Ultimately, something causes us when we hear somebody who's been through it to go, if they can do that, I can do that.
And it was meant to happen for Gary and I to learn what we were supposed to learn about loving our child more appropriately. Gary, he just did worlds to get help Lee solve the financial problems. They were just they were too much. It was there was no way out. But Gary figured out how to negotiate some things, and so he was a real blessing in that way.
Yeah.
And I'm just his cheerleader, Lee.
She's got a big bunch of pom-poms at home. She gets up and cheers, right? What would you say, Penny, to any parents out there that have an adult child or even if it's a teenager or whatever, but they're watching their child struggle? What would you say to them today as far as giving them encouragement and hope?
I'd have to give the credit to the Lord that He led you to us. So they got to be looking up. You've just got to look up. If you look anywhere else, you're not going to find what you're really, really need. And I've seen God's hand in this. I didn't see it in the beginning, but I can look back, and I do now.
So it's really a matter of just trusting the Lord.
I think so, and being very wise about doctors that you choose. His first psychiatrist was he just was a doctor for diagnosing and prescribing. So there was nothing there beyond that. But then we did find a Christian psychiatrist and a Christian psychologist
That work
and
together.
they adore this boy. They're just crazy about him.
He's just a big, gentle teddy bear.
Oh, he just is.
Yeah. Well, so what you're really saying to parents is just hang in there, and at some point, just keep seeking the Lord, seek the Lord, seek the Lord.
Yeah.
Go where He leads you in the process, but also know that, like most things in life, after you've gone through them for a little while, and especially when you're on the other side of many of the difficulties we face in life, you can see God's hand through it more easily than you can when you're going through
That's
it.
exactly right.
Yeah.
You just have to look up every day because you don't know where you're going to step. You could take the wrong step and it could be devastating. So just look up and ask for direction.
Yeah. And know that you too are going to have to, even as a loved one, you start experiencing the frustrations and the exhaustion from caring for somebody, especially when they're severely depressed. That takes a lot to just be there every day and to just not let that pull you down in and of itself, right?
I just wanted to have the strength to keep going, to know Lee has a little boy who is he's just it. And so Cohen went through all of that. And as we rejoice that Lee's better now, and Cohen is a recipient of that, but he's very aware, and he gets scared sometimes that his dad's going to get sick again.
Well, and the thing is that I've learned with my own children, they are really even more mature as adults because of what they've experienced and what they've gone through in their life. And the Lord can even take those things and turn them into good things for them because they are able to handle situations in life that are pretty complicated and do better than the average bear because they've been through so much. So how about you, Lee? What might you be willing to offer to those who are listening to us as far as encouragement, maybe somebody that's struggling? And
never give up. There was moments in my depression where I just wanted to end my life. That's all I could think about there were days when the best I could do was just procrastinate about suicide. Hold out and have faith that you'll get through this, and it's literally one day at a time. But you don't give up. You just need to celebrate every day. That you can get out of bed and just. It is very, very small incremental progress when you are recovering from a manic episode, and it feels silly sometimes celebrating. Just getting up, getting dressed, going outside. And it can feel childish. Like people would, congratulate me or, celebrate me on such small things. And it felt so menial, but looking back on those, they were big steps. But it's hard to see that when you're going through it because you're so far from where you were.
Well, and what you do when you're depressed, at least I did, I wanted it to be over. So that meant I wanted just one gigantic step I could take and put it all behind me. Well, you can't do it. And then that almost becomes a vicious cycle because you cannot will yourself out of depression. You cannot do that. And instead you have to, a lot of little things have to happen along the way. And so you just got to keep moving forward, even though they may be little tiny steps. And all of a sudden, then you realize, I did take that big leap, but it was made up of little steps, little things that when they come together, they make a huge difference.
Yeah, you can never connect the dots going forward. But when you take time and you take time to reflect on the progress that you have made, you can go back and you can connect those dots.
Yep.
And then you can, that's when you can begin to see hope and a future for yourself again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being with me today, and I appreciate it. I just want whoever's listening to know that there is hope. God has a plan. There is a future. Do not give up. And if you feel like you cannot go forward, if you feel like you've got a plan and you want out, call someone.
Absolutely.
Call a hotline, call your family, call someone. Don't believe that for a moment. That's just a lie. It's a lie. And we've all been there. I mean, I've been there myself. And but I could tell you that there is something on the other side of all the darkness, and it does go away. It does go away. And even your circumstances that seem like they can do you in can all of a sudden become the very thing. It's when all those things that you thought mattered are lost, when you've hit rock bottom, that you realize that Jesus is the rock you needed all along, and the bottom is there, and it ain't moving.
Absolutely. And there's always hope, and you can feel so alone when you're going through depression.
Right.
And when you're having those suicidal ideations, or suicidal thoughts, you're not alone, and you just need to reach out and be strong enough to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people out there that are willing to help.
Mm-hmm. And if you know somebody going through this, sometimes it isn't a matter of suggestions. Sometimes it's just easy things like just be there. When they're laying on the couch and sleeping or can't get out of bed, go sit on the bed and watch TV with them, or do whatever you can. And sometimes it's just your presence. It's just knowing when you're depressed that you're not alone physically and emotionally. But just know there's hope. You will get through this, and God will see you through it. So I'd like to ask you if you would, Penny, offer up a prayer for us.
Precious Heavenly Father, I cannot tell you how full my heart is that we safely made this trip, that we found Fresh Hope, that we found Brad in the deepest, darkest time for my son. And I just offer Brad and Fresh Hope to everyone who's suffering from a mental illness. Grab hold. There's no place to go but up. And I just thank you. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you both to Lee and Penny. It was great to have you today. And I'm so appreciative of the fact that you took time to do this with me. For those of you who are listening, please consider attending an online Fresh Hope group meeting. And hopefully we will have even more than just one, and numerous ones on different times and different time slots. I want you to know that we're thankful that you did listen to this edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health, and I hope and pray it's been helpful to you. If you are struggling with suicidal ideation or suicidal thinking, please call someone now. Just turn this off and call them. Otherwise, we'd really like to hear from you. So email us your comments, questions, insights, and we'll answer questions on the program, or we'll share your comments and insights with our listeners. You may leave a voicemail also on our podcast website. That is freshhope4mentalhealth.com with the word 4 or the number 4. And if you'd like to connect with us on Facebook or Twitter, you'll find that information on our websites also. We do have a YouTube channel with insightful videos and a link that can take you to those videos on freshhopeformentalhealth.com. The network on YouTube is called Fresh Hope Network. And would you mind doing me a personal favor? If you're receiving our podcast through iTunes, would you mind writing an honest review of the program? We would really appreciate that. Your review will help us on the rankings of iTunes and help other listeners or other people searching for this kind of podcast to find it more easily. And also be sure and tell your friends about this podcast. Now, until the next time, may the Lord fill you with His hope May it be fresh and new daily. I'm Brad Hoefs, your host, and this has been another edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health. You've been listening to Fresh Hope for Mental Health. For more information, go to www.freshhope.us.